5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Good evening, everybody. Happy summer. This is the Monday, July 18, 2022 Board of Education meeting. Thank you for joining us. I hope everybody's doing well. Before we begin, as always, if you could take a second and please check your phones, make sure they're on silent. And once you're done with that, please join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, Mr. Hatfield, please take roll.
Absolutely. President McFarland.
Here.
Vice President Roush.
Here.
Secretary Hatfield's here. Treasurer Lauterbach.
Here.
Member Baker.
Here.
Member Blasey. Absent. Member Frazee. Absent.
Okay, thank you very much. Moving on to the consent agenda, item 2.1 is the approval of minutes from June 20, 2022 regular meeting. Item 2.2 is a list of staff that have been recommended for hire. Item 2.3 is the adoption of the Midland School Code Articles 105 and 105C, schools of choice. Item 2.4 is a list of staff that have announced their resignation and the effective dates. Item 2.5 just says the June financials will not be available for approval until the August Board of Education meeting. And item 6 is a request for payment of school legal bills in the amount of $400, $690, and $907.50.
Adoption of the consent agenda.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Lauterbach, support by Mr. Roush. Any additional discussion regarding items 2.1 through 2.6? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next up, presentation to the board. Mr. Bruton, item 3.1.
Yeah, thank you. The numbers that you see in the resolution presented to you this evening shouldn't come as a surprise. These are the numbers that we've presented to you over the past 2 board meetings. These are the exact same tax rates that we showed you that will support the 22-23 budget. There's a very lengthy resolution, but within that, there's 4 rates to be able to pick out. The first rate is 18 mills on our non-homestead property. The second rate is our hold harmless millage, which this year calculates out to 0.4782 mils, which is about a 0.1679 reduction from years past. The third rate is on commercial personal properties. This is 6.4782 mils. Commercial personal properties are subject to an 18 mil levy. They're exempt from the first 12 mils of that, but not our hold harmless. When you do that math calculation, that's what kicks out your 6.4782. And the fourth and final rate that's established in that resolution is our bond debt levy, which comes at the same rate that has been historic for the past couple of years, which is 2.95 mils. Your affirmation of this resolution this evening allows me to send out a form to all of our taxing jurisdictions called the L4029, which gives them enough time to be able to prepare the tax rolls for the upcoming collections.
Okay, thanks, Brian.
Thank you.
This is an action item, so I will accept the motion.
I move to approve the certification resolution for the 2022-23 fiscal year taxes. A complete copy of the resolution shall be attached to the original of these minutes.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Roush, support by Mr. Hatfield. Any additional discussion regarding the tax resolution? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thank you very much. Next up, we have item 3.2, another action item, the East Lawn Property Purchase Agreement. Mr. Sherrill.
Yes, if you recall, last fall, we started the progress of redeveloping the East Lawn property with a community meeting out on the property with the neighbors surrounding that. We partnered with the city of Midland, obviously have interest on how that will be used in the future, and going back on the tax rolls for everyone, and the community foundation as they've worked on helping fill the void of housing in certain areas in the community. And so from there, we issued an RFP out to the public. We had 3 that followed up with us. We chose 1 through the FFO committee to continue to pursue. We are now down the pursuing, along with attorneys, to develop a contract. And we have a contract in front of you that we are asking for your approval to enter into the sale of the East Lawn property for the 6.5 acres, which excludes the baseball field, we'll continue to own that to allow Little League Baseball to continue to go forward.
I move adoption of agenda item 3.2, approving the purchase agreement between the Midland Public Schools and River Caddis LLC.
Support?
Motion by Mr. Lauterbach, support by Mr. Roush. Any
I
additional?
have a question. What's the time frame for making this happen?
Yeah, so it's buried in that very lengthy contract, John. And so it could happen very quickly depending on if they get all the approvals from the city for rezoning and some other issues. We have to do a survey on our behalf. John Lauterbach, you may be able to remember some of that better than me since you looked at it too.
The Little League Diamond, the baseball field at Bayless and East Lawn is going to be split off.
Okay.
So they have to get a survey to come up with a legal description for that square. Then they have to get approval from, I believe, the planning commission to do a lot split.
Okay.
So each of the survey will take time to get the surveyor scheduled.
Okay.
The planning commission only meets, I think, once or twice a month, so it's a timing issue.
Similar to
and-
selling your house. Once
Right.
we're done through that, then we go to closing.
And closing is contingent on those things happening,
The
so.
split off and
Right.
Yeah.
resurvey?
We
Okay.
don't anticipate any problem with that, it's just a matter of schedule.
Thanks.
Any other questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thank you, Mike. All right, that will bring us to item number 4 on our agenda, requests to address the board. And I have a list of 5 requests in front of me, so we will start with Mr. Mark Oliver. Good evening, Mr. Oliver. Thank you for joining us. Yes, sir, the floor is yours.
Well, my talk here is about my involvement with what's known as sexual reaction disorder. And I'd like to start out with a statement from the book Sexual Abuse of Young Children. And they start out by saying, "A conspiracy of silence surrounds the boy who was sexually victimized. His victimization is proof that he failed in one of the primary mandates of the masculine role, to defend himself. To share his trauma is to advertise the defeat and invite only immediate humiliation and continued stigmatization." They start out the book with that statement, and I say that's what happened to me. And that's why I have been belittled, because I couldn't handle what happened to me, and I was emotionally damaged by it. So I'm here today to ask some questions. Why was I allowed to have erotic sexual behaviors my entire 13 years at the Midland Public Schools? Why wasn't it reported to child protection agencies, and why wasn't I treated for the trauma of being molested? I believe I was molested when I was too young to remember it, and began most likely when I was an infant, and continued until I was a toddler, and the person was afraid of getting caught and stopped. On page 234 of the book Sexual Abuse of Young Children, which I brought with me, the authors state, "Once a child has been molested over a period of time, the light switch of eroticism has been turned on. How should this eroticized behavior be handled?" And on page 236, they state, "The children are sexualized at an early age, and many have an eroticized way of looking at the world." What I was doing is known as sexual reaction disorder. This disorder is described by Les Harris of the Utah Foster Care Foundation during his presentation, Caring for the Sexually Reactive Child. Harris explains, "The term sexually reactive means I'm responding to my own abusive experience. Children who have been abused in any way will most likely reenact the abuse. So in the case of sexual abuse, that would be true. I'm going to reenact the abuse that has occurred to me." I believe that's what I was doing in school, or when I was a young child. I only got 37 seconds left. Well, Mrs. Jones saw me reenacting these behaviors, and she told me to go into the restroom and clean up after I had displayed these behaviors. And then I played basketball. I had what's known as scarring of the genitals, which is tears of the skin of the genitals. It's both male and females, both. If they show these tears, it is a sign that they've been molested. And I played basketball at Midland High, and I say that they saw these tears, and it should have been reported that I had been sexualized.
Thank you, Mr. Oliver.
So, all right, thank you.
Okay, next is Carla Schumann. Hi, Carla. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Hi. Oh, okay. All right, thank you. So I can't see, and anyways, I wanted to start off by saying thank you so much for listening when I spoke the last time I was here. So I want to start off by saying thank you, Superintendent Cheryl, for connecting me with the other superintendents and other staff here in the district. So I would like to start off by saying that I spoke with Amanda Sherry, the MTSS coordinator, regarding mental health and what we can do to support students and the whole identification and things like that. So I'm happy to hear that there's a lot of things coming, and I believe that was mentioned. So it's good to hear that it's going to be in place. But a couple of things that I addressed with her was, how do we keep you? How do we keep the staff? Because as budget and as funds, we know that things dry up. So I wanted to ask, how do we plan to continue that model after the 2 years or the 3 years that the money is being offered for these services? And another thing too is, how can we provide training to parents in identifying these issues? Because I'm a true believer that not everything relies on the schools. We can't put all the pressure and all the identification on the teachers, but we also have to give parents an idea and support and education and how to identify those issues. So she said she was gonna talk to her superintendent and kind of go from there. So I'm looking at my time. So the other thing I wanted to talk is I did speak to Superintendent Jeff Jaster regarding regarding safety. And I was really happy to hear that there's a lot of things in place. I did have some comments, and he's gonna look into certain things just to make sure that those tasks that they had are in place. And I know some of the information is kept confidential for obvious reasons. So that's one thing. And the other thing I wanted to address, because one of the concerns that I have, as you know, is nurses, having nurses in schools. So I did a little bit of research, and I did talk to Superintendent Jaster, and I told him I was going to provide him some of the information I was able to find. But based on CDC and the American Federation of Teachers and the National Education Association, they have found that nurses in schools help reduce absenteeism. They also help identify mental health issues and other medical issues in our students. And when there's a nurse in the school present, teachers tend to spend an average of 6.2 minutes per day dealing with injured or ill students. Without a nurse, that raises up to 26.2 minutes per day. So 22.6 minutes per day that each teacher spends dealing with sick children. So I think it is cost effective to have, or at least to start the conversation about having nurses, not necessarily nurses, but having a system way where nurses assistants, someone that is there to provide that support to our students. So I'm here to ask the board to consider that for the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Joe Bonadies. Good evening, sir. Thank you for joining us.
I've been here many times about your new bylaw packages. Congratulations, it's now in effect. I did not disagree with anything Brad Blasey said about the value of the changes at the June 20th meeting, though it looked like he and Phil Roush had staged the defense beforehand. I did not see the long takedown of my early comments made at the end of the June 6th meeting until after the June 20th meeting. Seems you broke the agenda and the superintendent was supposed to give comments before the closed session, so I left. Items 8 and 9 got switched, and so I wasn't there. Regarding the comments on my concerns, I never mentioned that John Lauterbach said Thrun was good for the board's defense. That was a quote from Mr. Sharrow. I did say that the two lawyers on the board both thought it was a good idea, which was another Sharrow quote. Even with the extended comments at that meeting, no mention was made that the bylaws were on the website for comparison, a specific request made on multiple occasions. In fact, the link had only been sent to the board on June 8th. However, at the June 20th meeting, Mr. Sharrow said the bylaws had been on the website for a month, so the public had 30 days and the board had 12 days. Anyway, good to know it was there after the fact. I have looked at the selection of bylaws. Yes, it's simpler, easier to maintain, and harder to prove malfeasance. Now, water under the bridge for another illustration of lack of transparency. Next topic, freedom of information requests. Up until June 20th, 2021 meeting, you acknowledged what letters contained FOIA requests on the minutes. Now they are just documented as generic letters. While the administration has been a little adversarial on FOIA requests, more on that later, we have been able to get the board packages for a few meetings. These are large packages. You folks get 4 days, if you include Saturday and Sunday, to go over 150 to 200 pages. You have my sympathy. I've not been through everything yet, but I had a big surprise. In the package you all were given for the June 20th meeting, there was a 28-page policy section on how you were going to handle the next health crisis during the 2022-2023 school year. Full description of how you were going to do virtual learning for the kids again, lots of details on the middle of the process and the end of the process for grades, but we are now aware of the exaggerations that the government is capable of, and we hope the threshold for abusing the kids will be a little higher this time on the front end of that process for engaging that process. We've heard a lot about mental health concerns for minor populations. Can we have the same concern for the majority? And the fact that this information was in the package, distributed to the board, but had zero mention during the meeting is not aligned with the Open Meeting Act and doing the board's business in front of the public. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Renita Bonadis. Good evening. Thank you for joining us.
Good evening. I wanted to help educate the public a little bit on the process of the Freedom of Information Act. I did put in a request, and that was made on May 27th, and it involved the agenda packets for the MPS board meetings. That information was met with a 10-day extension request from Mr. Bruton, the FOIA coordinator. So I did eventually get the response in a timely manner after that, basically stating that they granted the request, which we are allowed according to FOIA to get a 6-month subscription, which is what I requested, as well as the 3 prior months. It was stated in there that the district has not determined that a waiver or reduction of fees assessed for processing your FOIA request is in the public interest. So therefore, there was a fee of $344.97 requested for the 9 agenda packets. In response to that, I asked Mr. Bruton if he could explain why this did not fall under the conditions within the FOIA law for the fee document, which says a search for a public record may be conducted or copies of public records may be furnished without charge or at a reduced charge if the public body determines that a waiver or reduction of the fee is in the best interest, because searching for or furnishing copies of the public record can be considered as primarily benefiting the general public. My further comment, it would seem that disclosing this information is indeed to benefit the general public. It is a public meeting after all. We are forbidden to attend any of the study committee meetings where this information is discussed. Then we sit in meetings to hear motions for details that we are not allowed to see. Your feedback is appreciated. So then I received a response saying that the Board of Education meeting agenda information is currently made available to the public in multiple modes, noting the board agenda, which is made available, topics are discussed and acted upon in a public forum at the monthly meetings. Meeting minutes of education subcommittee meetings are read aloud at each meeting. Meetings are broadcast live. Meetings are recorded, made available to the public. Minutes from each Board of Education meeting are made available to the public. So it is the opinion of the district that the disclosure of the information in the current formats affords public access. So therefore, I send a check, which we have to pay a check for half of the fee to begin with, so $172.48 to receive this data. My concern with all of that, yes, we've gotten the agenda packets, which I appreciate, because according to the Freedom of Information Act, we have access to those as the public. As was noted, there's no longer a notation when you receive letters from the community of whether there's a FOIA request or not.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Next up, Ms. Lisa Hanson. Good evening. Thank you for joining us.
Good evening. My name is Lisa Hanson. I began attending and speaking school board meetings last year, April 2021. It's been a very interesting journey. I don't think any of us could have imagined all that's happened since then. And I chose to simply observe over the last few months because I want to publicly say that I think that you're all good people. And nothing that I say is any kind of a personal attack. I think there are a lot of good people throughout our community and country that have been deceived and manipulated by the powers that be to buy into the agenda that's being pushed through our schools. It's incredibly unfair for this to come down to parents and grandparents and school boards across our great nation. Our leaders have failed us. They've forgotten that their responsibility is to represent we the people. They've aligned with identity politics rather than standing up for American values. This is bigger than a political party. It comes down to our God-given rights and liberty. Our schools are responsible for keeping our kids safe and academically educating them. Everything else is overreach. I believe that everyone should be treated with kindness, respect, and dignity because all lives matter. I've observed that those preaching tolerance are typically the least tolerant. I've watched adults call people names and even declare that if people don't agree with them, they can't be friends. It's irrational and immature behavior. Difference of opinion and robust debate are part of our American experience and tradition. We're a melting pot. Diversity runs much deeper than skin color and gender identity. There's nothing inclusive about trying to shame people into silence and bullying them into compliance. Kids are forced to go along with the agenda or they're reprimanded. That violates their First Amendment right to their free speech, and that is unacceptable. So, like our kids, I have the right to simply say no, thank you, enough is enough. I've personally witnessed horrific bullying by a transgender child to a non-transgender child this past school year, so it's an illusion to believe that bullying is one-sided. Bullying is never appropriate, yet that's exactly what's happening to parents and grandparents and kids that disagree. Just because the media and big tech and universities and corporations are going along with this doesn't make it right. This agenda has been decades in the making. We're not experiencing an organic movement. I'm not sure what the most recent results are for where the United States ranks internationally K through 12 in reading, math, and science, but until we're number one, our kids deserve for the focus to be on their academic education. Identity politics has no place in our schools. It's creating division, and that is not unity. Denying our kids their First Amendment right to free speech does not create an inclusive culture, and it undermines our American values. So I am here to say enough is enough. Thank you. God bless America.
Thank you. I don't have any other speakers or requests on my list. Is there anybody in the audience who maybe came in late and didn't get their name on the list? Okay, we will close the floor then and move on with the agenda. Next up, we have Finance, Facilities, and Operations. There are no meeting minutes. So, Mr. Bruton, we'll just move right into item 5.1.
Thank you, sir. We are acknowledging for information only, no action required, 2 gifts. The first was from First Robotics to benefit the Northeast Middle School robotics team for $806, and the second was support for the boys and girls cross-country teams at H.H. Dow High School from Patrick and Allison Simon for $300, and we appreciate both groups' generosity.
Thank you very much. Next up, we have Human Resources. Again, there are no meeting minutes. This is item 6.1 and 6.2. Mr. Jester.
Thank you. First, the below staff members announced his retirement with the effective date. Mr. Richard Stevens has been a plumber in our MPS maintenance department. His retirement is effective at the end of the month, July 29th. Also, for 6.2, board and staff of MPS extend their deepest sympathy to the families of Mr. William John Rowe, passed away June 21st, 2022. William worked as a custodian at Midland High School. He retired in 2007, and he had 28 years with the district.
Thank you very much. And wrapping up our agenda tonight is correspondence to and from the board that is listed in the agenda, followed by Section 8 scheduled activities. That is a list of our remaining scheduled meetings for 2022, and it looks like pending the approval at our January 9th organizational meeting, there are a list of tentative 2023 meetings scheduled. And before, that brings us to our study discussion session. Any points of clarification on anything discussed tonight before I turn the floor over to Mike?
Just say one thing I think that goes on behalf of the board is how appreciative we are of the state budget getting passed.
Yes.
So I just want to talk briefly about the role that the board plays in that process through reaching out through our representatives. You know, Representative Glenn and Senator Thomas were very engaged and helpful in that process, and just want to show our gratitude to both them and the governor as they work through that bipartisan process to pass a budget that really helps MPS. You know, the two big things that we advocated for were 31A funding, so at-risk funding is now 1-to-1. And then the second thing was they made $1 billion down payment on unfunded pension liabilities. So both of those things are great investments in our students.
Thanks, Phil. Okay, Mike, I believe the floor is yours.
Yeah, Phil finished with some fiscal and stuff there, and so the audit is occurring right now in the business department, and so you can imagine stress levels are always high there. We'll know, and I'm sure as Lori's turned me in probably almost 20 straight good audit reports, that she'll do it again. Looks like, as always, some funds, we leave some funds, and you'll get a more positive report on the 22-23 fiscal year as we close the books as well. We'll bring all those details to you next month or September when they wrap up those pieces of it. Construction projects are ongoing, a lot of small stuff all over the district. Everything's going pretty well. A little slow on if you remember, we had to upgrade the ability to power all the equipment at Northeast. One of the reasons we hadn't done it, and consumers may be back ordered on that piece of equipment. Not the HVAC that's going in, but the actual, Phil, you may understand it better than me, where the power runs through to supply more power into the building for all that equipment. So we could open in August with the bottom classrooms being fed, but not some larger spaces yet in that building, but still 100% better where that building was. But everything else is going pretty well. Hiring's been busy and ongoing. We have a few special ed positions still to fill, and then we have our job fair for non-certified staff to try to fill those. But all in all, for where most districts are probably going to fill some classrooms with subs, we look like to appear to be that we'll have all certified teachers in there and good ready to go. So that teacher shortage is getting real around the country, particularly in Michigan. So that's it.
Okay. Well, that's all we've got for tonight. I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Support. Motion by Mr. Lauterbach, support by Mr. Hatfield. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. We stand adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your summer.